All right, so today we're going to be talking about Chapter 8, Lesson 1. This is dealing with circumference. So when we are looking at circumference, the thing that we're going to be really focusing in on is the circle. So circumference, what circumference means is the distance around a circle. Or if we want to start thinking about in terms of area and perimeter, this is the perimeter of a circle. Now, there are a couple different ways that we can use to find circumference. One of them is called the radius. Now, the radius is the distance in a circle from the center to the edge. So the center is right here, goes all the way to the edge of the circle. It's the distance between the center and the edge. Diameter is very similar, but it goes from edge to edge through the center. So notice how the diameter here stretches all the way across the circle, goes through the center of the circle. So it's very similar to the radius. In fact, if we know one of these two, either the radius or the diameter, we can actually find the other one. So, for example, R is how we represent radius. D is how we represent diameter. So if we know R, or we know the diameter, we can find the radius by simply either dividing it by 2 or multiplying it by 1/2. Conversely, if we know the radius, we can actually use the diameter or use the radius to find the diameter by simply multiplying it by 2. So let's go ahead and use this information to help us find some examples. Example 1, it says the diameter of a circle is 48 centimeters. Find the radius. So we're looking for the radius, so we're going to use either these two equations. We know that the diameter of a circle is 48. So I'm going to substitute 48 centimeters in for the diameter here. And 1/2 of 48, so the radius is 24 centimeters. Example 2, it says the radius of a circle is 9 inches. Find the diameter. So in this case, we know the radius, we have to find the diameter, so I'm going to use this equation right here. So I'm going to write down the equation D equals 2R. And I know that the radius is 9 inches. So I'm going to substitute 9 in for the radius. And 9 times 2 is 18. And remember to include your units. So it'd be 18 inches. All right, so that is going to be the end of here, lesson or examples 1 and 2. Let's turn it over now and actually use this information to help us find the circumference. So, like I said earlier, the circumference, this is the perimeter of the circle. And we can use the diameter and the radius to help us find the circumference of the circle. So there are two different things. This is if we know the diameter. This is going to be if we know the radius. So C is going to be representing circumference. So if we know the diameter, we can use that to multiply by pi. And we'll talk about some approximations for pi here in just a moment. But if we know the diameter, we simply multiply it by pi, and that's the circumference of the circle. Now, if we know the radius and not the diameter, we can do the same thing. We can go pi and multiply that by 2r. Because if you recall from the front side here, the diameter is 2r. It's twice the radius. So if I know the radius, I multiply it by 2 to find the diameter. All right, so now with pi here, in 8th grade and moving forward, we're going to use the actual representation for pi. Your calculators have a really good way of doing this. But in 7th grade, if we don't have our calculators, we're going to either approximate pi as 3.14, and that's going to be the decimal version of this, or we can actually use a fraction, and the fraction representation would be 22 divided by 7. And if you actually look at a calculator, let's turn this on here. So if I look at a calculator here, 22 divided by 7 is actually really close to pi. Very, very close to pi. In fact, if we were to find pi down here on the equal sign, or the exponent sign, so if we type in pi, this is what the calculator gives us as far as pi goes. So very, very close. Notice how there is a very small amount of change that is being made. So 22 over 7 is a great representation for pi. All right, so let's talk about example 3 here. It says find the circumference of a circle with the radius of 35 inches. So we know the radius, which means we're going to focus in on this equation here. Now, it tells me the radius is 35 inches. I can use either one of these two approximations, but I want to use this one right here. And the reason why I want to use this one right here is because the radius is actually a multiple of 7. So I'd be getting rid of this fraction. I'll show you what it is also if you use the decimal version. But I'm going to substitute 22 over 7 in for pi. And we have 2, and the radius is 35. So if I change all of these to fractions, I have 22 over 7 times 2 over 1 times 35 over 1. You may be able to see this and you may not, but here and here, there's a common factor of 7 that we can use. So I can pull 1 7 out of 7 and 5 7s out of 35. So my new problem really looks like this. (22 times 2 is 44. And 44 times 5 is 220, and our units would be inches. If you decide to use 3.14 for the approximation, let's do this again. So pi, I'm going to approximate as 3.14. And r, again, is 35. So let's start using our calculator here. So I have 3.14 times 2 times 35. And our answer should be very, very close to 220. And in fact, it's very close, 219.8. And now, because both of these are using an approximation for pi, both answers are going to be acceptable. The only thing is, though, because these are approximations for pi, the way that we have to write this is c is about 220 inches. Or, in this case, c is about 219.8 inches. The reason why we have to do that, again, is because 3.14 and the fraction 22/7 are both approximations for pi. All right, so that is the end of lesson 1. If you have any questions, please let me know.